sophisticated global supply chain has millions on contract, and there have been performance agreements guarding them. Please, can you help provide a perspective on how should businesses manage the post-COVID firework of litigation that is envisaged?
Thank you very much, moderator. We all know what COVID-19 is doing to the entire world. And we know for sure that there is nobody, there is no country, there is no region that is not affected. That is why it's a pandemic. We also know, I believe, that the world has become a global village, such that commercial transactions run across continents. For example, there are some products that are made in America. If you look at the components that come into it, you see that some were made in Vietnam, some in China, some in wherever. And then most of the raw materials we know comes from Africa and other underdeveloped countries. So we can see that there is an interface of people, of regions in the supply chain. Now, what we now have is that when you have all this lockdown or illnesses or other things that affect production in a supply chain, in a part of the supply chain, it is bound to affect the end product. But now we have the COVID-19 affecting practically everybody. And so there are going to be lots and lots of defaults in performance. In Nigeria, for example, we know that the president, relying on the Quarantine Act 2004, has exercised the powers vested in him by that law to make certain orders which require people to stay at home. The markets have been closed down, and only very few industries that the government feels or believes render essential services are working. Now, what this means is that a lot of businesses are unable to perform and go to work. And this will lead to default, and they will not be able to fulfill their contractual obligations. Ordinarily, this will expose such businesses to litigation. But again, don't forget that I started by saying that the supply chain involves quite a lot of people. And so where there is a default on one part, it's like what the economics call a multiplier effect. It affects all the others. And then we have these incidents on our hand. Now, what can these businesses do? Well, there is what they call force majeure in law, which allows you which is a clause you can put in your contract to create an exemption or a sort of refuge for you to hide under in case there is default on your part. Now, this is something you put in ahead of the default. But then the force majeure only covers instances that you can envisage. Now, I'm not sure anybody really envisaged this COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, you could come up with a clause that says, okay, in case there is disruption in value chain or whatever and all of that, But then when you get to court and these issues arise, you begin to find lawyers trying to find a way of exempting you from the exemption clause you are putting there, because that is what law is all about. You keep trying to look for a chink in the armor, and then exploit it. So it goes then beyond this force majeure. It goes to the issue of how do we manage our contracts that we have now that have been exposed to this pandemic. One thing we could do, and which I've seen some businesses do, is to already begin to sensitize the other parties to the contract about the fact that, look, there is no doubt that there is going to be a default. Do we begin to think of renegotiating these contracts? Do we begin to think of doing it in another way? As Mr. Hosseini said, right now, a lot of things that should be done with people gathered in one place are being done online. These are the sort of things that I think we should begin, businesses should be looking for an alternative ways of performing their contracts without being in default as much as possible. Aside from that, I think businesses also should be looking to government to find how government would help them to cushion the effects of whatever breaches in contracts they may have, and then start to cover them from liability or from a case being instituted against them. Now, post-COVID, how do we manage these things? Post-COVID litigation. This is a time when disputants will have to look to the various alternative modes of conflict resolution. Mediation, neutrals, negotiations, engaging the other party, and showing that, look, this thing affected everybody. It affected everybody. Instead of wasting our time and money in litigation, which can go on for very long, even the arbitration that is touted as one of the fastest ways of resolving conflicts, we've seen that sometimes it doesn't work that way. You may get your award in arbitration, and then the losing party goes to court to challenge the award based on the recognized grounds for challenging the award. And that begins a whole new litigation on its own. So it is a time for parties to begin to think of how they would settle these disputes other than going to court. And settling disputes involves give and take. It involves give and take. You say, okay, I know that you have suffered in this way, but you know I have also suffered in this way. Can we just meet ourselves halfway or one way or the other, and things like that? These are things that we can do. Also, there is the issue of insurance. Now, this is a very treacherous ground, because even the insurance companies, I'm sure, will themselves face a lot of litigation. I mean, because of claims that will be made on them for insured goods. Those who brought in perishable goods, for example, from outside that are being withheld at the ports, they are going to, whoever loses there will claim for insurance. But then we should also begin to look at how can insurance come in to help in these instances. Again, people should, litigants or companies that are faced with default, they can also just prepare to have some kind of funds that they would use to take care of some of these damages. As I said, you want to reduce it to the barest minimum, and if you are able to reduce it to the barest minimum, then you look to what you have to pay off on these things. Again, you can say, okay, this thing has happened this way. Can we have another contract wherein we can have some give and take away from it, other than the initial contract that we have? So these are some of the issues that I think disputants can resort to post-COVID-19. It's a question of mitigating your loss and trying to salvage whatever is left of the contract for performance. Thank you very much.